I met a woman at a bar, then the night tilted. I had the corner stool where the bar bent, a familiar notch in the varnish that fit my wrist bone like a groove someone had carved for me long before I showed up. The air was warm and stiff with old smoke and lemon oil. Every time the door opened, the night's cold breath pushed in and skated over the floor. The jukebox behind me coughed out a song like it had started mid-sentence. I looked down into my glass and saw my face, tinged amber, and I thought about how a reflection was only light pretending to come back. She took the stool beside me like she owned the one squeak in the cushion. Her coat could have been any color, but the low lights made it a soft, unguessable dark. She didn't ask if the seat was taken. She set her hands on the bar, and the wood seemed to lift toward them, as if the grain recognized her palms. "Do you want to hear how I was made?" she asked. The consonants landed in my ear like coins. Then she kept talking, and her voice changed mid-sentence. One word old woman, the next a small boy, then a choir's hum under the shape of a single mouth. My scalp prickled. I didn't look at her right away. I watched her through the bar mirror instead, the way you watch a road behind you. Her eyes in the glass were full of movement, not a sparkle, not a light. Shadows too many for the room crowded across her irises, a theater of tiny silhouettes that didn't match the bodies around us. When my gaze met hers in the mirror, it felt like stepping into a hallway that kept adding doors. "Not interested in tricks," I said. "Magic shows down the street." I meant it to come off easy. It didn't. "It isn't a trick," she said, and the way she said it made the air thinner between us. "It's a record." I turned. She had a face that refused adjectives. Neither beautiful nor plain, neither young nor anything anyone could make a joke about. She could have walked into any photograph and never been the subject, but the picture would lean a little just to keep her in it. Her hair lay in a braid over one shoulder, the tie at the end a strip of paper. When she breathed, the strip shivered. "How you were made?" I asked. "As in born," she smiled without humor. "As in bound." The jukebox thumped, then fell quiet. The bartender, Cal, leaned on one elbow and pretended not to listen, the way you pretend not to watch a slow leak in your tire. "If I tell you," she said, "and you judge me false, the town takes one more name to prove its appetite. If you judge me real, you carry a piece of me. You become witness and ward." She tipped her head like she was listening to my heartbeat. "Either way, something leaves with you." I don't know why I stayed. Maybe it was the familiarity of warnings. People in this town loved rules with invisible teeth. No one touched the tree by the bridge, no one swam in the quarry after dusk, no one called out for the girl who wandered into the field and never came back, not because we didn't care, but because we were taught not to name things you couldn't bring home. I had a name I didn't say out loud. Lena, not a girlfriend. Closer than that and less. We had the kind of closeness that could survive a winter of not speaking. She hadn't gone missing. Not officially. She was the sort of absent that work and habit could hide, and I was the sort of person who believed in phone calls while doing the dishes. I had called her the night before and let the ring fill the kitchen. "Okay," I said, "tell me." Her fingers traced a circle on the bar. The varnish caught a low golden bruise from the light. "Once," she said, in the voice of a woman who knew the weight of overdue notices, "there was a librarian who could not stand the blank spaces between names." She didn't say the librarian's name. Maybe she didn't have to. I could see her in the telling, the sweep of hair pinned up with a pencil, the cardigan that smelled like the dust that holds the shape of every hand that ever clapped it away. She had a habit of using her own saliva to press down lifting corners of labels. She believed in drawers that shut all the way. When people began to leave and not return, she made a new drawer. She cataloged the posters, the woman beside me said. Thumbtacked to telephone poles, taped to shop windows with cloudy Scotch tape, stapled to rec center walls over event flyers for spaghetti dinners that went on without the missing. She took them down and smoothed them. She logged each one by the small observable facts: height, age, last seen wearing. She made notes in the margin that didn't belong in any formal index. Who cried when they came in? What was said after, while hands were on the counter and the door chime kept pretending it meant hope? The stranger's voice flickered with other voices as she spoke. A string of whispering girls braided through it, then the crack of a man trying not to sound desperate. "You're talking about a file," I said. "I'm talking about a hunger that learned paper first because it spent its days in a room with spines." She smiled again, slow. "When you touch enough pages, the pages touch back." The bartender wiped the same circle of bar twice. The filter over the lights hummed. The woman drew 2 small lines with one fingertip on the varnish, and I saw, as clearly as if she'd uncovered it, the ghost of a carved letter beneath the clear coat. It wasn't a trick of grain. It was a letter that already lived in the wood. The bar had a history of knives. The librarian kept her records, the stranger said. Open the drawer, take a breath that smells like glue and ghost apples, read the list. Names in a column, dates in their own whisper to the right. After a while, the paper began to arrange itself. That's how it starts. A pile that stacks without being told. Margins that creep closer to the words at night like a cat. The spine that warms under your palm as if blood has figured out how to be paper thin. You expect me to believe that? I said, softly, not to spook anything inside the story. You have felt it, she said. You have read something and felt it live in your mouth after you closed the book. You have turned a page and thought, this page weighs more than it should. She paused. Some of the records began to write back, not in ink. The paper itself began to have a texture you could read with your skin. The librarian learned to. She taught herself the braille of grief. The more she traced, the more the blank spaces filled in. You think grief can fill a blank, I said. I didn't mean to be sharp. It came out like glass under a foot. I think the world hates a ledger that doesn't balance, she said. The librarian fed it the only thing that made sense, the truth of being seen. She read the posters into the drawer as if her breath were a slip she signed again and again until her name wore thin, and the drawer breathed back. The woman's voices trembled, then stilled on one woman's whisper. When the drawer had enough names, it needed a body to carry them. Paper burns, drawers swell in the summer and stick on their rails. She offered herself the way you offer a match to a lamp. I am not a martyr. She wasn't either. She was a binder. The bar's letters under glass sharpened as if a thin fog had lifted from the wood. I could read the oldest names, cut into the surface, varnished over and over into a smoothness that hid shallow grooves. The light puddled into them and made them dark. I had never thought about who took a blade to a bar, the bored, the mourners, the angry. Maybe the same person, different nights. The names looked like they'd been written by a single hand trying on outfits. You're her, I said. I am what she made and what made her, the woman said. I wear those who are gone. I am not only their names, I am the letters between. She glanced at the mirror behind the bar, and I followed her gaze. The reflections were a half-beat behind the people they belonged to. Someone lifted a glass, and the mirror's hand stuck at the table edge for a second like it had caught on a thread. Then both hands came together. Someone brushed hair behind an ear, and in the mirror, you could watch the air remember the hair's shape a fraction too long. It was the kind of lag you don't notice unless you're looking for something to be wrong. A draft snuck under the door and curled around my ankles. The room smelled like wet wool and citrus and the aftertaste of something sweet that had long since been swallowed. The bartender brought us water without asking. The glass sweated a ring, and the ring had an outline like a coin left in a pocket too long. I pressed my fingertips to the bar. The names, if they were names, were warmer than the wood around them. Proof, she said, and it wasn't a dare, just a word. Proof, I repeated, because sometimes saying a word twice puts it into your hand. She lifted her hand and pressed her palm to the bar. Something like a firefly moved under the varnish from the point of her touch and found a carved word. It landed in the groove and glowed, faint and steady. A second light slid in the grain like a bubble traveling under paint. It found another word and lit it. The names under her hand became little embers in the wood, breathing. I recognized none of them. Then one of the little lights slipped away from her hand and drifted toward me. It reached the groove beneath my wrist. I hadn't carved it. Cal hadn't. No one I knew had. It was Lena. The letters drank the light and gave it back. Not a spotlight. A low, patient glow like a coal that hadn't gone out. I pulled my arm back and the glow went with me. I felt a warmth settle above my heart like someone had laid a folded piece of paper there. That's not funny, I said. My voice put the word funny in a place where better words belonged. The woman's eyes softened. For a moment, I saw a crowd move across them. Boys with summer haircuts, women with eyes that knew how to sew, men with hands that had learned to let go of tools because they'd had to. The silhouettes turned and looked at me and did not see me, and then they did. It isn't meant to be, she said. She turned her head toward the wall near the door where a corkboard hung. There were 3 flyers on it, a lost dog, an ad for a yard sale last week, and a missing poster softened by time. The edges had curled into a polite wave. A piece of tape at the top had yellowed. The woman lifted an eyebrow. The corner of the poster peeled itself away from the board. The room breathed in. The tape separated with a sound like a quiet, slow tear. The poster slid free. It floated not theatrically, not like a stage effect. It moved the way paper moves when the air takes it. It dropped to the floor face down. I got up and picked it up. My thumb found the corner, and as I turned it over, the date at the bottom changed. It didn't roll or flicker. It settled into tonight. The photograph above it, where a stranger's face had been, blurred. It cleared. I looked at myself. My breath went out like being punched without the pain. The print wasn't flattering or damning. It was the dull kind you get from a workplace camera. My hair was wrong in one spot. My left eye had that tired tilt people get when they forget they're about to be preserved. "Okay," I said. My voice cracked on the K, okay. The bartender had stopped cleaning the circle. He stood very still, his dish towel in both hands like a flag he'd forgotten wasn't meant to be waved. A couple at a high top had their mouths parted in the same shape but different meanings. The jukebox tried to start a new song and choked on static. The mirror behind the bar caught my face and did not quite bring it back in time. "What do you want?" I asked her. "To finish what was started," she said. "To keep the ledger from balancing itself in cruelty." Her voice was a man S for a breath, a boy S for the next, then only hers again. "My wager stands. Hear me and decide. Judge me fraud and the town takes someone. Judge me truth and you take a piece of me. You carry it until your arms ache and then you keep carrying it. What happens if I walk away without judging?" "You don't," she said. "The drawer closes on something. A finger, a promise. I don't want that. I don't return names. I hold them so they don't go hungry." I thought of Lena. How we had walked out into the field behind her house one night to watch the Perseids, lying on a blanket while mosquitoes questioned our ankles, and the grass gave off the day's heat in little sighs. How she had told me her mother sometimes woke and wandered, how there were days whole rooms went missing from her mind and came back smelling like rain. How we had promised to write down things that mattered. I had not kept up my end. I had a sink full of dishes and a list on the refrigerator with items you can buy again and never own. "Finish your telling," I said. She folded her hands as if about to pray and then didn't. The librarian wrote until her wrist hurt. She filed until her fingers learned the song of the metal rails. She stopped eating in front of people because crumbs are a form of reading, and she didn't want the pages to get jealous. The paper learned the translation of flesh. She sewed the last poster to the lining of her coat with thread she used for buttons that don't want to stay on. She walked to the middle of the stacks and laid down on the carpet that smelled like figs and dust and the soles of shoes. She said, "You may have me if you keep them." The drawer pulled its breath over her face. It learned a new definition of spine. "And you were made," I said. "I was bound." She touched her braid. The paper tie kept its neatness like something that had remembered how to be straight despite being crumpled all day. I am pages walking on legs. I am a table of contents looking for an author. I do not choose who vanishes. I make a place where their names are not allowed to starve. "What do you need me for?" "Witness and ward," she said. "I need someone whose mouth is not my mouth. I need someone to speak when I cannot be everywhere. I need someone to carry the overflow. Drawers stick. Sometimes their rails warp. I need someone who knows what a good label feels like when it lays down on the tab and you smooth it with your thumb." Her smile caught me off guard. "You keep lists," she said kindly. I laughed and it came out a little broken. "I forget them. I leave them on the counter." "You still make them," she said, as if that were a thing to be proud of. Behind the bar, the mirror lag lengthened. A man in a ball cap, red, no logo, lifted his drink, and in the reflection his hand hovered in the air for a beat too long. When it finally made it to the glass, the mirrored drink was less full. A blonde woman laughed, and in the mirror her smile stuck like a note forgotten in a pocket and washed and found again only when you iron your shirt and the paper turns brown. My phone lit on the bar. A list of names, the speed dial favorites I had pretended I didn't curate, blurred. One by one, the circles grayed out, tiny faceless avatars without pictures. The letters softened. The top bar that told me what day it was went blank for a blink and then returned as if embarrassed. I brought the phone close. Lena's name didn't change, but the weight of it altered in my hand like something had been taken out of the pocket the phone was in. "Wait," I said. The woman watched me without moving. You said if I call you a fraud, the town takes a name. Yes. She didn't frown. She didn't do anything theatrical with her hands. Not a punishment, a balance. Who chooses? You do. She said it with the softness of a person telling a child to hand back the insect so it won't be hurt. Something cold ran through me that wasn't the draft. No. Yes. Her eyes in the mirror were crowded with silhouettes again, but they were quiet now, as if they'd taken their seats and folded their hands. If you deny me, you must participate in the balance, not as a victim of it, but as its clerk. You put the slip into the drawer. You slide it shut. You do not get to look away and say the furniture did it. You pick a name. And if I say you're real, then you carry a piece. I will mark you so the names know where to go when they thread through the air looking for a tongue. You will be a place they can land without burning. You will be tired. You will never be bored again. Her mouth quirked. You will learn which truths the drawer likes best. What kind does it like? The kind you can't tell without touching something, she said. She lifted her glass and left a print on the surface, a circle inside a circle, a record. It likes the heat of the palm that pressed down when they signed the poster. It likes the cracked edge of the tape, the damp of the night the staples went in. It likes the particular way a name sits next to a date. It likes the way your mouth has to move to say them both out loud. I thought of saying no. I thought of putting my hand on my chest and saying, "Do not write on me." I thought of choosing a name out of spite and an accidental cruelty. I thought of picking my own and stepping into the mirror's thin place to avoid having to carry anyone else. The mirror's lag pulled like current. In the reflection, I watched my face decide before I felt it. It's a weird thing to see yourself choose as if the mirror had been waiting for your body to be brave enough to keep up. I'll carry it, I said. The weight of the words settled in my mouth. They had a paper feel to them, fibrous, as if they had been made of the same common stuff as grocery sacks. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, the silhouette stood and stretched as if they'd been sitting for a long reading. "All right," she said. "How? Give me your arm." I held out my left forearm because it already had a long, pale scar from falling off my bike as a kid, and I thought it made sense to put this with that. She didn't touch me right away. She looked at my skin the way a person looks at a patch of wall and knows where the stud is without knocking. She put the flat of her hand on my forearm, and it felt like she had dipped her palm in warm water and laid it across me to bring down a fever. At first, nothing happened. Then the warmth gathered and moved like ink finding a channel. I could feel lines writing themselves under my skin, not pain, but a sense of decision. It was a feeling like when you press a label down and feel the adhesive give up its air and settle into the surface. A set of numbers arranged itself along the inside of my forearm where the veins laid their own lines. The numbers didn't read like numbers. They felt like a call number in a library has a shape to it, a little song you could hum and find again. A small sound came from the bar mirror, a whisper of glass that wasn't a crack, more like the memory of one. The lag snapped back. Hands and reflections matched again as if a clock had been wound. The names on my phone brightened their circles, not all of them. A few stayed gray, and when I touched them, my finger felt cold on the screen like the glass had a draft of its own. "Is that it?" I asked. "Almost." She lifted her hand. A faint print of her palm had risen on my skin, not color, not heat, a pressure memory. When I blinked, it rearranged itself into something like a small index tab just under the surface, a place for a label to go. "Now they can find you," she said. "What do I do when they do?" "You tell the truth that fits." She nodded at the bar. "You start with the small truths, the ones that keep the edge of the drawer smooth. You say their names with the things they loved to hold in their hands. You say what they were wearing when they learned to tie their shoes. You say what their kitchen smelled like when the light came through the window over the sink in the late afternoon at the time of year when the wasps are sleepy. That keeps the ledger from balancing itself in cruelty," she finished. "It prefers to balance in care. What if I can't think of a truth?" "You will," she said, and for the first time I heard only one voice in her, and it sounded like someone opening a window in the morning and hearing the street and knowing the world hadn't left. "And when you can't, you ask. You go where their poster still bobs on the nail in the wind. You touch the place the thumbtacks were. You look under the varnish." She tilted her head at the glowing groove under my wrist, and the faint, warm coal of Lena's name burned a little brighter and then easy again. "Why me?" I said, Because the human mouth loves that question even when the answer is something like, because you were in the chair when the thunder started. Because you are the kind of person who listens to the sound of paper when you tear it and feels sorry, she said, and I had no defense against that. The bar took a breath like a room after a long story. The couples started to talk again. The bartender took down a glass and shook his head like he could free it of something he'd heard. The jukebox found its rhythm and played a song that knew the words to itself. I slid off the stool. The chair's squeak under her made a noise like a book being opened halfway and held. "We're not done," she said. "I know," I said, "but I need air." Outside, the night wrapped its damp coat around me. The neon from the bar's sign buzzed and painted the sidewalk with a false strawberry glow. The paper in my arm hummed, no, not a sound you could catch, but a vibration you feel against your bones when a truck passes 2 blocks away. She stepped out, and the door swung shut behind her with a little kiss of air. "Walk," she said, and I did. We went down past the closed storefronts with their display windows holding bowls no one needed and pillows with words stitched on them. We stopped in front of the library. It looked smaller at night. The steps held the warmth of the day like cupped hands. Inside, the security lights kept the front desk in a soft wash that made everything look like a memory of itself. We didn't break in. She put her hand on the door, and the lock answered with the sound of a person remembering where they put something. The door opened. We went down the central aisle. I could smell the old rugs and a lingering breath of lemon from the last deep clean. We stopped at a little room off the main stacks. It had a long table and an old microfiche machine with a plug no one could use anymore. She stood in front of a bank of cabinets, flat files with wide, shallow drawers. "This is where she kept them," she said. At first, before the drawer made me. She pulled a drawer. It slid like a boat into water. Inside were envelopes. On the top of each, a name had been written in careful hand. There was a map of the town under the stack, a copied sheet with drawn-on circles in pencil that had been erased and redrawn until the paper around each circle fuzzed with rubbings. She took one envelope out, laid it on the table, and touched 2 fingers to it like a blessing. It made a sound like a mouth tasting a word. "Say one," she said. I swallowed. My tongue felt clumsy. "Lena," I said. "Tell me something true about her and make it small," she said. She had," I caught myself. The room waited. She painted her own keys so she could tell them apart in her purse. The mailbox key was green. The back door was orange. The car key was blue, but she scratched the paint off with her nail without noticing while she talked on the phone. The blue flaked onto her lap, and when she got up, it stuck to the back of her leg. She didn't know until she got home. The flake rode there like a fish scale in dry air. The drawer breathed. It's the only word for it. The paper inside the envelope softened like a throat swallowing. Somewhere in the building, the heater ticked despite being off. The air warmed just enough to make my eyes want to close for a second. "Another," she said. She would cut tags off shirts and tape them inside a cupboard door because she liked the texture of the little squares, I said. The truth unspooled because it had been waiting. When she was sad, she baked bread, but she never ate it. She dug her hands into the dough and said she liked the way the bubbles gave way. She broke the crust with the back of a spoon so she wouldn't wake her mother. The envelope's edge lifted a hair, as if to draw breath. The woman nodded. "Good," she said. "The drawer is fed. It won't need to take a name tonight." "Tonight?" I asked. "It's that hungry." "It lives where we live," she said. "It likes schedules. Nights when the bar is full. Holidays when the ads pile up. Storms." Something dislodged in my chest that I had been holding in place with a stubborn thumb for years. I wanted to lie down on the long table and let all the truths I had not said climb out of me and organize themselves. I wanted to go to everyone's house and open the drawer where they kept instruction manuals and warranties and say, "Tell me something true about your father's hands." "What about you?" I asked because if I was going to carry a piece of this, I needed to know what not to expect. "Who tells your truths?" "I am not fed that way," she said. "I am the mouth and the shelf. But sometimes, if someone sets down their hands on the bar and holds them there until the wood knows, I can feel it as if it's for me." She smiled, and it was almost shy. "I am a bad appetite. I go on forever and never hate myself for it." "You don't take people," I said. "No," she said. "I keep them from being taken clean." She ran her fingertips over the lip of the open drawer. "Do you know what it is to have a name disappear so thoroughly that your mouth forgets how the vowels fit? Not even a wrongness. A blank." Her eyes went far away in that way people's eyes go when they listen to a sea you can't hear yet. If you had told me I would be in charge of this, I would have said no. That's how I know you didn't choose wrong. We stayed until the clock on the wall lost the minute hand for a second and then found it. When we left, she locked the door without touching it and we went back to the bar, because there were people there who had not yet decided whether to accept their reflections back. Inside, the air had cooled and the condensation rings had multiplied like coins spread out to count. Cal looked at me and then at my forearm. "You good?" he asked, as if those two words could carry a body. "I'm marked," I said, and he nodded like I had told him I'd gotten a job that would keep me through the winter. A man who had laughed too loud earlier was quiet now. His reflection in the mirror didn't smile when his mouth did. It held still and then came back around as if it had taken the long way through a hallway. His phone sat face up on the bar. The names on it were all gray. He didn't touch it. He looked like someone waiting at a bus stop and trying to decide if the bus that stopped was the one he should pretend he meant to take. The woman put a quarter on the bar and pushed it toward him. "Make a call," she said. "I don't want to hear it," he said. "You don't have to talk," she said. "Just listen to the ring. The drawer likes the sound. It reminds it the world still has sequence." He looked at me like I should translate, but I had nothing better. He picked up the phone and dialed. The ring filled the room like rain on soil inside a jar. He held the phone to his ear and closed his eyes. He didn't speak. I felt my forearm hum. The index tab under my skin warmed and a word rose in my mouth like a fish coming up for flies. I said it. I didn't mean to be loud, but it came out like a name does when you see someone you love on a street you didn't expect and you call to them without deciding to. "Mary." The man opened his eyes. He put the phone down. "Mary," he said, as if the word had come from somewhere more honest than his chest. His reflection matched him again for a moment, then it lagged, it waited. It came back with his hands. The woman nodded at me. "You see?" "I don't see anything," I said, but the truth had my tongue in a good way. "Good," she said. "You're not supposed to. You're supposed to keep doing it." "What happens if I stop?" "The ledger balances in cruelty," she said simply. "It takes the neatest name it can find to make up the difference. The one with the cleanest handwriting. It prefers convenience." I didn't sleep much that night. When I did, I dreamed of drawers closing softly and of paper breathing, not a suffocation but a receiving. I woke with the taste of envelope glue on my tongue and the word orange in my mouth, and I wrote it down because otherwise it would slide away like a coin down a grate. The days after were not grand. That's the thing about being marked by something. The extraordinary settles in like a neighbor. It's always there and you still trip on your own front steps. My arm hummed at odd times. In the grocery store next to the bruised apples, I would feel the tab under my skin warm, and I would say, out loud or only to myself if there were people nearby, "He always took paper bags because he liked the way they crackled when you fold them flat." In line at the post office, she licked the stamp even when they told her not to because she liked the taste of a job done. At the sink, he stacked the plates largest to smallest, but kept his favorite in the middle so it wouldn't chip. No one thanked me. No one had to. The town felt like a room that had learned to breathe with its shoulders again. I kept a notebook near the door with a pencil whose eraser I chewed when I was thinking, and I wrote down the truths so I wouldn't repeat them too often. You can repeat them. The drawer doesn't mind, but it feels lazy. Sometimes I went back to the library and sat in the little room with the old machine and the flat files and spoke softly to the envelopes as if they could hear me better that way. The woman who had bound herself to the drawer was not there every time. When she came, she sat across from me and watched as if she were memorizing my face in case she had to pull it out of a poster someday and set it back in my skull. One afternoon, a storm gathered itself over the river. The sky went the heavy yellow of a bruise. The bar filled earlier than usual. The neon lights buzzed in the way that makes the hair on your arms rise. I took my stool. Cal nodded. The woman slid into the seat next to mine with the ease of a person swimming back into a lake they had made themselves. "Tonight it will take if we don't feed it," she said without warming up. "How do you know?" "You can feel when the ledger is itching." She rubbed her wrist like the writing under my skin pained her purely by association. Storm nights, bar lights, end-of-month bills due standing in kitchen baskets. People become very easy to file. "Then we feed it," I said. My mouth went dry anyway. The mirror behind the bar had begun to sweat. That's the only way I can say it. A thin fog surged and retreated as if the glass had lungs. The reflections lagged like tired dancers. A woman who always sat at the end of the bar and had never given anyone her full name, even in 9 years of showing up at 6:30 every Thursday, lifted her gin, and I saw it. In the mirror, the glass didn't move. Her hand stayed still. Her face smiled. Her mouth didn't follow. My phone lit. The top line, where the time sits like a bird, went blank. The battery icon disappeared. It came back at 99%. The list of recent calls scrolled itself blank. Then it repopulated with names I didn't recognize and dates that belonged to other months. I put the phone face down. The bar felt tilted, not by much, just enough that the coaster on the far right looked like it was thinking about sliding. "Start," the woman murmured. I put my forearm on the bar. The tab under my skin burned, a pleasant heat. I opened my mouth and the truths came like a song I hadn't learned, but somehow knew the steps to. "He fixes his bike upside down in the laundry room because the rented place doesn't have a garage," I said. "He doesn't have a good pump, so he borrows mine and brings it back with a little chalk mark on the hose, and when I see it, I know it's mine and not someone else's. She wears slippers that make her feel like she is walking on bread," I said. "She turns off the bathroom light by hitting the switch with the back of her wrist because her hands are always full of lotion. He keeps a photograph of himself at 8 years old because he likes the way his ears look like they're listening," I said. "He tapes it behind another picture like a little secret so he can look at it without anyone saying anything." I didn't choose the pronouns with intention. They arrived. I could feel my mouth making room. The tab under my skin clicked. I swear it clicked. A tiny sound like the place where a file sits in a drawer when it knows it's home. The mirror wiped itself without moving anything. The reflections caught up. The fog thinned. The phone that belonged to the man with the gray contact circles blinked and flashed his wife's name, and he picked up and said, "I'm here," and then, "I'm glad you called," and then nothing out loud that we could hear. Something in his shoulders settled. The bar from which a name would have been taken if we had done nothing breathed like a person laughing without making noise. I felt good. There's a kind of satisfaction that has nothing to do with money or praise. It's the feeling you get when a jar lid that has refused you finally gives and the pop in the center tells you didn't break it. It's the sensation of a drawer that has stuck sliding magically on its rails because you learned how to use 2 fingers together instead of one. I looked at the woman. Her mouth had thinned, not unhappy, just far away. "What happens when it isn't enough?" I asked quietly. "We give it a choice," she said just as quietly. "Truth or emptiness. Most nights it chooses truth." "And the others?" "On the other nights it takes the neatest name." She looked at my arm. "This is one of them if we don't keep going." I kept going. I told the drawer about a father who folded his napkins into boats without realizing and left them near the sink like 2 small craft marooned by dishwater. I told it about a teenager who pretended not to care about her handwriting and spent an hour writing the same sentence until the loop sat flat. I told it about the way a neighbor stood on his stoop every morning at 7, stretching his back with his hands on his hips, and how everyone learned the weather that way. The mirror made a sound like someone had rubbed a finger around the rim of a glass. It was very faint. A slice of air behind us cooled. I felt the pressure change in the room, the way your ears feel in an elevator when the numbers blink past the floor you meant to get off on. "There," the woman said. "It wants a name." "How do you know?" "It's done nibbling around the edges." She didn't lay it at my feet. She put it between us, a thing we would carry together and both call heavy. "If you say I am false, you must choose." Everyone at the bar kept pretending not to hear. The pretending was very tender. It felt like neighbors carrying a couch down a flight of stairs and telling themselves it isn't too heavy. "I won't deny you," I said, faster than I could have planned. The mirror and the envelope and the numbers under my skin braided together like rope and held. "I already said so. People change their minds under pressure," she said. No judgment in it. Only ink that had learned to live without caps. I could have asked for time. I could have walked out. I did neither. I put my palm flat on the bar over the glow in the groove that held Lena's name and felt the warmth come through like heat held in stone after sunset. "Tell me what to say," I said. "Something she never wrote down that would have made her laugh to hear you tell it," she said. I closed my eyes. The drawer inside me opened. She kept her house keys on a ring with a little plastic bear that was supposed to light up when you squeezed it, but the battery had died 2 years ago, and she never changed it because she liked the way the bear's surface got cloudy where her finger pressed, I said. She would tap the bear's nose against her teeth when she was waiting outside her door for the lock to remember itself. The bar sighed. I felt it, a small shift like paper coming into alignment in a stack. The woman's shoulders loosened. The room warmed a degree. The mirror cleared. The drawer closed without catching on anything tender. Later, after most people had gone and the neon threw a low ache across the floor, I asked, "What if I had said no?" "You would have chosen a name," she said softly. "And they would be gone," she said. "Not gone like a person who packed a bag, gone like a word you never learned." The place where their name fit in your mouth would be a smooth stone, no wrongness to rub against, just a comfort that would become sickness in a winter or two when you realized your mouth had fewer shapes than it used to. I set my hand on the bar. The varnish was cool. The glow under my wrist pulsed as if it had heard a distant bell and was answering it. "Has anyone ever chosen?" "Yes," she said, and her voices braided in a low unison. "Once a man stood where you are and called out his own name, thinking to take himself off the ledger's appetite. It accepted. He walked out the door and his wife set an extra place at the table for a week and never wondered why. Her hand learned a new way to stack plates, and she hummed a song she had never heard and no one noticed. She slept well. That was the part that made me angriest. She slept like a new animal that didn't know what it had evolved from. We were quiet a long time. Cal did the thing with the towel and the quarter. He cleaned the parts of the bar that didn't need it. I did the work. There isn't a better way to say it. I fed the drawer with the small truths until I could feel when it needed them before it could ask. On Sunday afternoons in winter, when the radiators ticked themselves soft and the streets squeaked wet under boots, I walked to the field behind Lena's house and said the things I would have told her over the phone. I could feel the air catch them where her street bent in a shallow curve, and the telephone pole there had 2 staples in it with the merest suggestion of paper left between them. I didn't get her back. That's not how it works. This isn't that kind of story. The drawer is a promise of care, not a jar where you can break an egg and watch it become a bird again. Months passed. I learned the way the tab under my skin warmed in the early morning when the mail truck knocked the curb and the letters settled. I learned that the drawer liked evenings the best and would take breakfast if you made it good. I learned when to sleep and when to sit up in bed and listen to the sounds a house makes and say a small truth out loud about a person I could sense tugging at the edge of some ledger far away. Sometimes the woman came. Sometimes she didn't. Each time she did, I could see more of the librarian in her, the set of the mouth when a spine cracked too easily, the way she checked the corners of papers as if turning down the tip of a page could be a sin and a kindness at once. Once, in early spring, I asked her, "Do you miss being singular?" "I am always singular," she said, and her voices were only hers at the edges. "I am the person who keeps the drawer shut on fingers, not closed. Shut." She rolled her wrist. "There is a difference." "Do you wish someone had said no to you?" "Yes," she said, "but not enough to say no to you." In late summer, Lena's mother died. The obituary was careful. The service was small. I went. The kitchen smelled like dish soap and cut melon. An aunt I had never met touched my arm and said, "I'm so glad you came," and I felt my body nod before my brain caught up with the shape of her sentence. On the way home, I stopped at the bar because the light through the window over my sink was the wrong sort, and I didn't want to stand in it alone. The bar was half full in that gentle way of a weekday early afternoon. Cal pushed me a glass of water without asking what I needed. The mirror behind the bar was calm. The names under the varnish glowed with the steadiness of coals in a long fire. She came in as if she had been walking the road in front of the bar for as long as there had been a road and had decided to turn in because her feet were mine to rest. "You're tired," she said. "I am," I said. "Say something." "I don't want to feed it out of grief," I said, stubborn. "You won't," she said. "You'll feed it out of notice." I looked at the bowl of lemons behind the bar and the way one had a thin scrape on its skin where a fingernail had grazed it. "She kept a jar of buttons on her dresser," I said, surprised at the subject my mouth chose. Not because she sewed, but because she liked to put her hand in and feel them click against each other. She never used a single one. She thought about it every time a button fell off a sleeve, and then she bought a new shirt. The drawer breathed. The air rubbed my forearm like a cat. Somewhere in the building, the old microfiche machine I had never seen turned on made a ticking sound in memory. The woman watched me like a person watches a hive they know how to open without angering anything important. "Thank you," she said. "Do people thank you?" I asked. "Sometimes," she said. "They do it in ways like that." She nodded at the lemon bowl. "They look closely. They go home and take the tags off their shirts and tape them somewhere and think of someone. They don't say my name because I don't have one in the way names are useful. They say theirs and they say another's. That is enough." On a night in early autumn, just when the leaves had decided to begin and the town smelled like dry grass and apples, I woke to a small sound the world had learned from paper. It was the sound of a poster adjusting itself on a nail. I got up and went to the door. The lock sat with the bolt out halfway, not in, not out, like a mouth about to say a name and stopping. I opened it and the night air came in cool. There was a thin rectangle on my welcome mat. It was a page from a magazine with no photograph, only a frame where one had been cut out. The edges were clean. The empty rectangle was the size of an old ID picture. The paper smelled faintly of glue, of all things that hold and let go and hold again. I lifted it. On the back, someone had written a list in blocky pencil. Not items to buy, not steps to take. Just nouns that fit in a mouth comfortably. Spoon, window, sweater, leaf, button, rain. I pressed the paper to my chest, and the tab under my skin warmed like a stove set to low and left that way because it keeps the house honest. I stood there a while, framed by the door, listening to my house continue to be itself. In the distance, a train sounded its long, low call, and the night rearranged itself to be where it was supposed to be. I closed the door and turned the lock and felt the bolt slide into place with a small, complete click. I went back to bed and lay on my side with the magazine page under the corner of my pillow. I thought about the librarian lying on the carpet with her coat lined in posters and offering herself as a binder. I thought about the woman at the bar whose braid was tied with paper that had learned not to curl under pressure. I thought about Lena tapping a dead plastic bear's nose against her teeth and laughing the first time I pointed it out to her and saying, "I know," as if the knowing were a thing we could keep between us forever like a good knife or a song. The house settled. The small noises knitted themselves together into a steady thing. I could have grieved louder. I could have broken plates. I didn't. I said a truth instead, soft into the cloth of my pillow where it would not surprise anyone but would still count. "She always answered the door with her hands wet," I said. "She wiped them on her sweater without thinking, and the damp marks made the wool smell like the sink." I slept. In the morning, the paper under my pillow had creased itself into a shape like a tab. It fit under my forearm where the index hummed. It didn't burden me. It didn't fix anything the way a person wants fixing. It was a thing to carry that told me how to carry better. The truth is not a cure. It is a way to keep the drawer choosing care over cruelty, night after night, name after name. Sometimes, in the quiet of late, I stand at my sink and listen. When the house is very still, I can hear, faintly, the scratch of something like a pen far away and the soft settling of paper on paper. I do not find it frightening. It feels like the sound of a book putting itself back on the right shelf, not because someone told it to, but because the shape of its spine knows where it belongs. Last night, as I turned off the lights, the bar's glow visited me, maybe a memory, maybe a trick of how glass holds light for a second after it should be dark. I went to the door to check the bolt. It was closed exactly the way I had left it, not a hair's width different. On the floor by the threshold, where people sometimes wipe their feet without noticing, a thin sliver of paper lay like a fallen eyelash. It was so small a breath would have taken it. I bent, picked it up, and felt the faintest heat. It left no mark on my fingers. When I set it on the counter, it turned on its own very slightly, a quarter-inch shift, and came to rest pointing at the drawer where I keep the thread I think I might someday need. The house was quiet. The night held. I smiled, and in the silence that followed there was one more sound, the gentlest click from that drawer, the sound of a file sliding home.